The news on Gene Simmons is shattering the headlines, and it's not the sort of tale fans had in mind. For years, he was the makeup-wearing, fire-breathing frontman of Kiss, a rock icon who transformed shock into stardom and stardom into riches. Behind the bravado and the makeup, however, are emerging fresh truths that raise questions about his family, his empire, and the decisions coming back to haunt him today. Is it scandal, redemption, or something that's in between? One thing is certain, the news gets louder than the music, and the truth continues to unfurl. Back then, before he became the demon, breathing fire during performances and spitting blood in front of screaming stadiums, Gene Simmons was simply Chaim Witz, a kid from Haifa, Israel, raised by a single mom who survived one of the darkest periods in human history. His start in life wasn't glamorous. It was characterized by poverty, trauma, and a determination never to be helpless again. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. That urgency would inform the character he eventually developed, one that was as much shield as it was spectacle. Simmons was born into a world still haunted by the Holocaust. His mother, Flora Klein, had escaped the concentration camps in Hungary, losing relatives to the Nazis before making her own escape and starting anew in Israel. She took that trauma with her, and though she did not talk much about what she went through, she said plenty through her silence and overprotectiveness. Chaim was raised in a world where survival was not something learned abstractly but something honed on a daily basis. By the mid-1950s, his parents were divorced. His father remained in Israel while Flora brought up Chaim by herself, laboring long days in factories. Sometimes his only sustenance was milk and bread. The kid who would one day be commanding arenas was, at the time, just another hungry kid scrounging by. He even fashioned his own winter jacket from an army blanket, an image far removed from the leather-wrapped rock god he later became. But adversity has a way of shaping ambition. Chaim escaped into comic books, specifically American ones like Spider-Man and Superman. Even before he could read, he learned the panels, teaching himself one word at a time because he wanted to know what his heroes said. By age 7, he had mastered Hebrew, Hungarian, Turkish and was starting to string together English. It wasn't words alone. It was about change. If his idols could hide their pain behind costumes and superhuman abilities, perhaps he could as well. In 1958, Flora took a life-altering choice. She and Chaim immigrated to Queens, New York, with nothing but bravery, no map ahead, and no money in their pockets. It was culture shock. Flush toilets bewildered him, and TV dinners, but school was brutal, and his accent labeled him again as the reject. Instead, he'd consider how he was going to leave his signature. He peddled cactus plants door to door, picked fruit, and learned English from television and comics. Each rejection hardened him. By his early teens, Chaim had already shed his old name and identity, legally becoming Gene Klein and later Gene Simmons. Gene came from cowboy stars like Gene Autry, and Simmons sounded like something a rock star would use. He played guitar for hours upon hours, hung out in small bands, and studied pop culture with a discipline he rarely applied in classrooms. The Beatles' appearance in 1964 on The Ed Sullivan Show ignited his soul. It wasn't fame he wished to look at, it was fame he wished to own. Simmons worked odd jobs in butcher shops, delis, and eventually as a teacher in Spanish Harlem, all the while sneakingly scheming his real career. Unlike most rock stars, he never drank or took drugs, he kept his eyes open and observed as others imploded. His vision was crystal clear, he wasn't going to be merely a musician. He was going to be a legend. When Simmons started working with Paul Stanley to work out the basics of Kiss, those early lessons came fully into their own. He would not be content to just be another musician, he needed to be bigger than that, beyond reach, larger than life. To this end, he invented the Demon, an alter ego born of horror movie lore, comic book villainy, and hints of his own youth. The face paint, the blood, the fire, all of it was more than show, it was a barrier and a declaration that he would never be that helpless little kid from Haifa again. The cornerstone was the visual. With Ace Frehley painting himself as the spaceman, Peter Criss as the Catman, Paul Stanley as the Starchild, and Simmons as the Demon, the image of the band became immediately distinguishable. In an age when rock groups tended to blur together, Kiss was a comic book brought to life. Simmons soon understood that music was just half the venture. The other half? Image, branding, and making Kiss a product that people could take home with them. By 1975, even before they had their initial big radio hit, Kiss got launched into merchandising, lunchboxes, trading cards, dolls, posters, and belt buckles. Parents who despised the music were purchasing Kiss-branded toys because their children insisted. Within a couple of years, merchandising was raking in millions, occasionally even more than record sales. The breakthrough came with Alive. In 1975, a live album that reflected the frenzy and excess of their live shows. It made them commercial stars, selling millions of copies. Suddenly, Kiss wasn't a cult band anymore, were headlining arenas, selling out concerts, and generating a fan base referred to as the Kiss Army. Simmons realized loyalty could be profitized, not only through tickets, but through everything that accompanied the event. By the late 1970s, Kiss had rolled out more than 100 licensed products, ranging from pinball games to Halloween costumes. Simmons came up with ideas most bands would find laughable, such as Kiss-themed coffins decades later. Critics sneered, calling him a sellout, but Simmons shrugged, being called a sellout means somebody's buying. This obsession with branding turned Kiss into a billion-dollar franchise, influencing how bands like Metallica, Iron Maiden, and Slipknot later approached marketing. Yet it came with a cost. Some fans felt the music took a backseat to merchandising. The infamous TV movie Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park in 1978, with its cheesy storyline and wooden performances, was universally ridiculed. Yet Simmons interpreted it as proof of concept. Kiss was not a band, it was an empire. For decades, Gene Simmons maintained the persona of the unapproachable rock god, the demon with thousands of conquests. Marriage and children were the antithesis of all that he represented. But life had other ideas. He met Shannon Tweed, a Playboy Playmate of the Year, in 1983. Despite Simmons' vow to never get married, their relationship lasted for almost 3 decades. They had 2 children together, Nick, born 1989, and Sophie, born 1992. Simmons adored fatherhood, but his reluctance to settle down vexed Shannon, who tolerated his womanizing and caginess for years. The hypocrisy in Simmons' life became insurmountable with Gene Simmons' Family Jewels, which ran from 2006 to 2012. The reality series stripped away the armor, revealing Gene handling family dinners alongside rock tours. Viewers saw him exposed, stumbling, sometimes gentle, a far cry from the demon. The show's most intense moments occurred when Shannon questioned Gene about his commitment issues. In one notorious episode, she found thousands of Polaroids documenting his sexual exploits with other women and set them ablaze in front of the cameras. But the greatest shock came in 2011, when Simmons was finally asked to marry Shannon. They tied the knot later that year, surrounded by Nick and Sophie. It was attacked as a publicity stunt by critics, but to many fans, it was redemption, a man finally facing his fears of love and eternity. For most of his working life, Simmons had lived on controversy. By the 2000s, however, the culture had changed. What had seemed like rock and roll swagger now came off as arrogance or creepiness. There were lawsuits and scandals in tow. In 2010, an ESPN makeup artist accused him of abuse. His own employees at his Rock and Brews restaurants accused him of harassment in 2016 and 2017. Privately, the cases were settled, but the allegations eroded his reputation. His lips landed him in hot water, as well. He attempted to trademark the devil horns hand gesture in 2017, infuriating the rock world. The same year, Fox News suspended him after he invaded meetings, dropped his pants to display scars, and made off-color jokes. In 2024, he was criticized for remarks on Dancing with the Stars, in which he cracked that one of the female dancers had fogged up his glasses. Social media labeled him the creepy uncle of rock. He refused to apologize, instead doubling down and insisting that he meant what he said. Simmons' cockiness, which had previously been a strength, now proved to be his greatest weakness. The scandals didn't cease. Simmons revealed the ultimate Gene Simmons experience, a $12,495 fan package in April 2025 in which the fans could roadie for a day, dine backstage, and get a signed bass. Critics labeled it hard times profiteering, but fans continued to snap it up. Simmons and Kiss were awarded Kennedy Center honors by President Donald Trump in August 2025. The occasion was divisive, particularly because Simmons had previously likened Trump's ascension to cockroaches scurrying out from walls. The photo op fueled charges of hypocrisy. And yet, moments of vulnerability still pierced through. Simmons wept in July 2025 recalling Ozzy Osbourne on CBS Mornings. For a man characterized by bravado, the tears shocked fans and took them back to the boy from Haifa who never wished to feel helpless once more. As Simmons gets older, having questions revolve around what happens when the demon removes the boots forever. Nick attempted to forge his own career in comics but was sidetracked by allegations of plagiarism. Sophie turned to music and modeling and became vulnerable in ways her father never managed. Shannon is still the keeper behind the mayhem. But Simmons' best heir is perhaps the Kiss brand itself. With more than 5,000 licensed items and $1 billion in merchandise sales, Kiss ranks among the most successful music franchises ever. Simmons takes pride in that. Ideas live longer than music, he repeatedly says. For 5 decades, Gene Simmons made his life a spectacle. But when the lights go down, the question still lingers: what is left when the fireworks die? His legacy is certain. He turned a band into a brand, showed music could be something beyond noise, and demonstrated how branding could be beautiful. But he became as much a lightning rod for rage, criticized for being extravagant, greedy, and arrogant. Behind the makeup, however, is still the kid from Haifa, the offspring of a Holocaust survivor who took an oath never to be helpless again. He became the demon, but also became a husband and father. Maybe his greatest heritage is not